Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Saving the World podcast with Luke Macmichael and Martin Rezny. Today, we're going to be talking about a new organization that I've recently come into contact with called RePlanet. RePlanet.ngo is their website. Very exciting things. They've been out about 3 years, a relatively new European organization that has done some amazing things with spreading word about science-based activism. Particularly the focus is on agriculture, changing all of our agriculture to some kind of precision fermentation or some other kind of farming method that's much less land intensive. And so in order to do that, they talk about a lot of different science-based things and a lot of new companies that are doing great things with that. We've mentioned it before a couple of times in previous episodes, but that's one of their main focuses. Another one is, of course, turning all the energy over to new styles of renewable. But the big difference there is they're much more focused on nuclear and trying to get new ways of nuclear and new clean modular reactors that can reuse some of the waste. And so those are their two big focus points in order to rewild the world and get about 50 to 75% of our current agricultural land to just let it go back to the wild and let nature kind of take its course, so that we're basically using much less land and we let the world kind of fix itself. So very interesting stuff. I just kind of wanted to just touch base and share that with everybody a little bit today. We'll try to keep it brief and keep it entertaining, but I'm hoping that I can pique some of your interest enough that you're wanting to go and watch some of their videos and then learn some of the things. I think they've done a great job with a lot of the very similar things to what we're talking about here every week. And so I'm excited to share that with you today. Martin, just for everybody else, what have you heard about RePlanet so far, and what's your initial opinions on it based on our previous conversations a little bit before I jump into it?
Well, pretty much just what you told me, but I've also watched a little bit of the video that shared from one of the interviews with what's the name of the person?
George Monbiot, Monbiot. He's one of the spearheads. There's several hundred volunteers already, and quite a few dozen that are kind of activists or writers, podcasters in their own right. But George Monbiot's definitely one of the lead guys. He's got hundreds of good interviews out there. Look him up, George Monbiot, and we'll link one of them in our video as well. Some of the best ones that we've seen that just kind of highlight it all. He's very well spoken, very interesting guy to listen to. I was really excited to hear one of his really good interviews this week. That was a new one that came out, and it just kind of inspires me to do a little bit more and a little bit better, and gives me hope, I guess. So hopefully we can kind of do similar things with our podcast and follow his lead and trying to give people hope and make people excited about doing something different.
Yeah, I do agree. He's a good speaker. That much I think within my expertise to have a judgment on a little bit. It was very good in the interview. I heard the part where he was explaining like one of the biggest problems is money in politics, which I guess most people who are trying to help stuff in the world agrees with. I haven't heard a lot of analyses that like, no, money in politics is great. Although, of course, there are many lobbyists for money in politics because they're paid money in politics. So it's definitely a self-sustaining problem in that case. But he especially, I liked how he explained some issues with, actually for me more interesting, it's a very European thing to criticize and valid to criticize, the problem with regulations. Like how sometimes the lobbyists can actually warp even on the level of something like the European Union as a whole, regulations to prevent something better from being used or implemented or taking place, and basically just stalling until the thing never progresses or is never allowed to be done at all. And just today I've listened to some more of interviews, or I guess just general videos on the channel of Urza, which is a Czech sort of ANCAP, anarcho-capitalist, who also explained a lot of the criticisms in specific context in the Czech Republic. It's like a local example with our postal services, which right now there's a bit of a scandal or situation that they actually don't have any money and are sort of failing, and the postal service might have to close a lot of offices. But the thing is that the reason why there's a particular number of postal offices in the Czech Republic is that some bureaucrat just decided that we need to have like 3,000 because he liked a particular number of distance to the nearest postal service. While anybody who understands capitalism to any degree or markets will understand that, like, that's not a great way how to allocate resources, and because of course the whole point of using markets in this case would be to determine which postal services are actually needed where or make sense in terms of like are affordable. There's like an example, which is actually the case a lot around here where I live in particular. Another, at least partially, national corporation, which is regulated nationally, are the Czech railways. And Czech railways, often there will be a situation where there's simply some sort of mandate that there needs to be a certain amount of trains, or I guess alternatively buses, that have to go from like stop in every village several X times in a day, to a point where you often would have a whole carriage on a train, or basically the whole train, or a whole bus, where like I personally would sit as the only passenger. Like it does happen very frequently, and sometimes you sort of feel like the leader of North Korea or something, and you have your own train. And I imagine it's not a very efficient way of doing anything. And
No,
it would be
absolutely not.
better, like last year I was in Montenegro, where I guess it's more capitalist. And what you would see is that, like, if you're going from like a small village to a small village, well, maybe send like a microbus. Don't send like a whole big bus, or like a train with like 15 times a day with like five carriages or
Yeah.
passenger cars. So I think for me, I guess even stronger, I guess just because it's less obvious, but even in Europe in particular, very important, was his argument about the problem with regulation. It's just interesting that he also connected it with the money in politics, that sometimes the reason for the regulation doing bad things is that it's being bought off by lobbyists, while at other times the regulation is doing bad things because a single bureaucrat decided rationally but kind of irrationally, just like because he likes a number, that it is this number, and it makes no market sense. So
Yeah, no, their main focus really, from everything I've seen, is very focused on science, and we've talked a lot about truth, and truth works, and trying to how to find real truth with everything we do. It really comes back to science, kind of testing things, testing the waters in different ways. Economics is really kind of just a science in itself, and just about all the regulations. And if you run government more like a scientific organization rather than kind of an emotional organization, I guess you could say, it might function a lot better. So that's some of their big pushes, is just trying to use science as the main focus for making decisions, and focusing on science that helps all of humanity. The other major thing that I found as well is the IP that they talked a lot about, where especially with this precision fermentation thing being so new and so revolutionary, it uses 100 times less land to make the same amount of food, and eventually it will get so automated and so efficient that it'll be half as cheap or 10 times cheaper than current food sources eventually. And it'll completely bankrupt the livestock industry. It'll completely bankrupt perhaps even much of the agriculture industry. The soy and the wheat industries will eventually be bankrupt because of this technology. And so you're going to get a lot of pushback. You're going to get a lot of companies lobbying governments to try to say, oh, this is not good. Precision fermentation has all these unknown effects. Maybe it's bad for your health, or maybe they'll try to kind of push all the different false fake news about it, perhaps. And there may be some of them that are generally not great. So there's going to be a lot of kind of back and forth over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think it's kind of similar to what happened with GMOs. But also, it's not like completely one-dimensional issue. It's not that it's just going to be great and somebody will slander it. I think like with the GMOs, sometimes you can do it in a way that's a problem. Sometimes it's just scientifically, objectively the way forward. And so you can't even say it about like the GMOs, like GMOs 100% definitely must be a bad thing / or a good thing. It's just that, yeah, there are definitely scientific ways and scientific arguments to be made how this could like increase efficiencies. This could increase like the resistance of the crop against, for instance, pests. So therefore, you won't have to use pesticides as much, and that therefore it just further like other benefits and stuff. But then I guess there's a possibility that if it's like technically a novel organism, like somebody could have like some sort of allergic reaction, or there could be some sort of issue going on. So you have to test for that and you have to make sure it's safe. But then you don't want to have those regulations just for the sake of regulations, or regulations that are in fact a method of stopping it, no matter whether it's good or bad, just because it's a threat.
Right.
So
And
with the precision fermentation,
yeah.
I just to finish my thought, with the precision fermentation, I think like on balance, it must be better and less problematic, scientifically speaking, than GMOs, because I can imagine a lot more can go wrong with genetic modification than with this specific approach, as far as I can understand it. But still, it's just you have to have the balance of like regulating it, but for the right reasons, to make sure it's safe, but not
Absolutely.
to stifle improvement.
And we've been using it for many, many years, decades and decades. We've been using it for obviously alcohol and lots of other kinds of fermentation. We're just kind of getting it to the point now with all the new, DNA technologies we've got to create, amoebas, or create, certain kinds of bacteria that, like we make yogurt, now we can kind of make meat or we can make milk, from all natural kind of sources that we throw in a big vat, and it just grows and it just kind of makes food. All you need to do is input energy or light or various kinds of things. So the point is once we kind of get these technologies working really well, where they're producing massive amounts of healthy, good quality food that we can essentially print into anything we want, make steaks, 3D printed steaks out of this types of food, or whatever people want. Then it comes down to the point of who controls that IP and who controls that technology. Is it going to be the same 4 companies that buy up all the technology and either charge huge prices for it because they can, and hold the world hostage because everyone else is running short on food? Or the other option that RePlanet focuses on is creating kind of more governmental organizations around it, for the kind of first time in history, bringing more social kind of shared resources into actually implementing this, actually making the IP open source for everyone in the world to be able to just kind of use this technology to build a brewery for food in every single city, in every single block, perhaps, where you're just walking down the street and you're picking up your 3D printed steaks from a local microbrewery, and it's all kind of shared technology that can be.
No, I think that's important. I think that one of the failures of like governments trying to solve these things historically, when you look at, for instance, some of the like communist or socialist collective agricultures, like it's there are potentially downsides to if you made it extremely bureaucratically centralized. So I think it's important to stress the open source angle, because then what happens is that it doesn't become centralized. Through regulation, it becomes more distributed. I think that's the sort of the distribution of the of the ability of people to do it is important, so that even the regulation, even if it's ultimately done by a government or a bunch of governments, ultimately leads to basically market forces manage like pushing forward the efficiencies of the process, because they don't want to implement it in a way like the whole point of this is to maximize efficiency. So you don't want to implement it in a way that arbitrarily decreases the maximum achievable efficiency of using it in practice, which government centralization could do if it was like so the government is going to decide how it has to be used in one way across the whole country or European Union or somewhere.
Yeah, and ideally it should be the world. I mean, everything we focus on is about how to get the right technology to the world that's going to help the world solve our world problems, climate change and destabilization and war. This technology has the potential to solve almost every problem you can imagine. It kind of relates back to the food scarcity and the scarcity issues that come around that, food and energy. So there's definitely a lot of potential there to just think about how to do it right, and how to kind of bring this together and use it as a peace offering to kind of bring all the countries of the world together in some way to share this technology and not have any one country or any one corporation control it. So anyway, that's just kind of a high level overview. Let's take a little jump aside and take a quick look at their website. I wanted to kind of get your impressions on it and see what they're doing right and what they could maybe improve on, if anything. So let me share that here. All right, where do we go? Share window. Not coming.
I think
There
like
it
just
is.
one thing until you find how to do it. Yeah. So I just wanted to
Okay.
say it made me think of also the issues with like the patents for medicines, because like that's what I think the closest issue probably, because the barrier is in some places, like particularly United States, the barrier is the IP. Like you want to have like what maybe is the good use of a government authority is to make sure there are available generics for the diseases, particularly something like diabetes, where some people just need it or they die. Like I think here
Yeah.
there shouldn't be a bottleneck in terms of availability or usability of IP. That I think is a way how you can't justify that in like sort of under capitalist logic, like that's like a free market at work. Like if somebody can hoard the ideas that other people, if they were implementing it, would just make everything better, then I think that's just a different kind of bureaucracy or different kind of centralization or dictatorship.
Exactly. Okay, so here's the website. Can you see it all right, Martin?
Yeah, see the planet
Right on.
turning.
So just read a little bit here. It's kind of a cute little turning world, kind of puts it in perspective. It's a nice animation. RePlanet is a new kind of environmental movement with a radical, science-backed plan to repair the damage to our precious starship Earth. We can liberate nature and elevate humanity. Let's replan the future. Let's replanet. I like the pun on RePlanet.
No, that's slick. Good marketing there.
But yeah, so that's kind of their overview. Let's just jump down a little bit. So there's a whole bunch of different talks. This is the one from George Monbiot, right here in the middle, that was really good.
Yeah,
the one I watched this week. Yeah, and just again, four prongs, very similar to our 5 pillars in some ways. Agriculture, focusing on the switch to a plant and cell-based food system. One of the main focuses is using precision fermentation, but you can kind of dig into each of these a little bit more. Development, which is kind of achieving prosperity across the globe ourselves. This is a really important plan, very similar to our worldwide universal basic income plan, part of our second pillar of kind of having peace and prosperity shared around the world. So I like that. You really can't have any kind of worldwide peace and climate plan without including the global south, including everybody. So I really like how they have that focus as well. And of course, energy, reversing climate change using all available clean technologies. Again, they focus on wind, solar, and all the other renewables, as well as nuclear and anything that can kind of be proven by science. That they're trying to really push nuclear again in Europe, particularly third generation nuclear, where they're much safer, much cleaner technologies that are actually using a lot of the radioactive waste that's already there. It's just sitting there. They can actually reuse it now rather than let it sit there. Yeah. Which I'm very excited about. So that's, again, a very, very good, clean way. We're going to need that energy to make the agriculture work. So they go hand in hand. And then, of course, the fourth prong, rewilding 50 to 75% of the planet by transforming, again, agriculture. So all the pillars kind of connect to each other, obviously, same as ours. And I like how they just dig deep. And they go down to what we're up to, rebooting food, rethinking nuclear. Switch off Putin's an interesting one. Definitely a new thing, obviously, where we really want to work together rather than, against.
Yeah, I think I sort of was wondering like why they specifically thought it important, but
it's mostly about the fossil fuels. Yeah, the fossil fuel.
Yeah, then it makes sense because they are very food and energy focused, and food and energy are a big part of, or very much interfered with by the war in Ukraine, because it's not just the fuels from Russia, it's also particularly like fertilizer and stuff like that. It actually is disruptive extremely for food production.
Yeah, I think if we can make this food production, especially with the precision fermentation, if you can make it localized so that every country in the world, every city in the world has a safe source of food and a safe source of energy that's kind of independent and run locally, then it really takes away a lot of the push to try to conquer other countries next to you. If you're self-sufficient on your own, you don't really need the extra land or resources from conquering the country next to you.
The conflict prevention is like, if you figured that out, it should prevent a lot of conflicts that would otherwise happen. It's similar with the lack of clean water. Like if you figure out water, food, and energy, then you're really canceling a lot of reasons for conflict.
Yeah, and if you can figure out energy cleanly, then you can figure out water too, because you can just use the energy to desalinate the ocean water or repump the water wherever it needs to go and clean the water. So they're all very tightly connected. And I really like the idea of, if we want a safe world where we don't have to worry about nuclear war, we don't have to worry about these kinds of World War IIIs, potentially world damning or world apocalyptic issues, then we really got to focus on the small issues of agriculture, energy first. So,
I just now just smiled because I've seen their spin on GMOs, the give genes a chance.
Here's the one. So this is, tools like CRISPR can deliver some really good advances. Obviously, we have to be careful. Obviously, we can't use things that are, potentially going to cause diseases or going to cause allergic reactions or whatever it might be. But there's a lot of good science out there, and we've definitely made a lot of progress in the recent future, particularly with a lot of changes.
It's just like there's the issue. Like, I guess this is quite defensible. I think it's much less defensible to do like the preemptively inventing new diseases kind of research. That one I think is dangerous. This one, you're just changing plants, and either the new plants will fail or they will be good. Like, there's not much if you're modifying plants specifically. I don't think there's much that you can do wrong. But of course, I'm not an expert in this field.
Well, you obviously need the CRISPR for the precision fermentation to some extent too, because you're basically modifying the DNA or the amoebas to create whatever protein you want them to create, and to kind of prosper in whatever circumstances, whatever vat you're throwing them into, they need to kind of be able to prosper in that. So there's definitely a lot of that technology that going into that. CRISPR is a huge part of all of this. So I think definitely you need some regulations, but probably a little less than we have currently would allow more scientific breakthroughs, perhaps. So it's just about being open-minded and science-based rather than worrying about the scares of what do you call it, emotional fear-mongering for whatever it might be, or just fear of change, I guess. The fear of change, wanting to go back to the way things were, or wanting to kind of always keep things as they are because it's safe, because we know it. We really got to get into the
random example, make them great again.
Yeah, exactly. That's any kind of phrase that's trying to take us backwards in time is really not that efficient, I don't believe, and it's not going to help us fix the problems that that kind of thinking caused.
Like, to bring back the glory days of any particular empire. I think
exactly. Yeah, we have to move forward if we're going to survive, and we've got a lot of new ideas, and so it really comes down to the hope, the hope of these new ideas, giving it a chance, giving science a chance, and figuring out ways to make it work. So then, what can you do? Maybe you are a RePlaneteer, but you just don't know it. Here's how you can support us. So number one, they've got a lot of good Zoom meetings. You can dive in. I've spent a couple hours in with several of them. I've gotten to know some of the leaders one-on-one. There's always 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the meeting where you can get out questions and talk to people directly. So those are a lot of fun. I definitely highly recommend someone joining in if you've got some time and want to meet some new people. Obviously, follow, subscribe, all the normal stuff that we always ask with our website as well, Saving the World Together. Follow us, help us out, talk to us, let us know what we can do to inspire you and then help you more to do more. And then, of course, donate. It's the same thing that everybody has. If you love a movement, they always need more money. They can always do something more the more that they get. So then it just kind of goes on to some of the things they're doing. They've got lots of different walks and protests, to some peaceful protests. There's definitely a part of it, trying to bring back nuclear as a technology, bring back a lot of the new ideas. Europe must keep low carbon nuclear, climate policy, time to become food numerate. George Monbiot is also a vegan, so he's kind of trying to push people towards that. But at the same time, you don't necessarily have to be a vegan if you can make your 3D printed meat from plant-based sources.
Yeah, that also gets around a lot of the ethical arguments and even the efficiency energy-based arguments.
Yeah. So that's most of the website. Then you can go find now. You can see where they are. Right now, it's mostly just Europe. They have a little bit in Africa, and they just open a new chapter.
Are they in Czech Republic? It's like you can zoom in.
Try to zoom in here. Looks like they've the closest one to Czech, Austria, I guess. Yeah, it's not quite in Czech, but yeah, it'd be nice to see. So it's great to see them growing. It's just been, like I said, just 3 years, and they've already kind of got all these different chapters growing with probably dozens, if not hundreds of people in each that are pushing the word. They're protesting, they're lobbying the government in their own way to try to give nuclear a chance and give precision fermentation a chance wherever they can. So it's exciting times. I'm very, very happy that they've made good progress, and I'm very much excited about trying to start a chapter in Canada. Notice there's nothing here in Canada. So at some point I might, I'm hoping to start some kind of RePlanet chapter in Canada to kind of go along with our Saving the World Together work. But they've really kind of inspired me to do more. And that's, I think, the key of any of these organizations, if you can inspire people of like minds. So one of the things I really liked about George Monbiot's presentation is that he really focuses on, in order to fix the problem, of course, the media is the main focus. We've got to somehow reclaim the media. And that's where these kinds of independent podcasts like we're doing here, or any of these independent articles, any independent writers that are just kind of writing it on their own, or they're doing their own thing. They're not really bought out by any of the big powers that be or any of the big media conglomerates. And we really just want to focus on open-mindedness and science. And we're not trying to, polarize things. We're not trying to say anyone's completely wrong or anyone's completely right. We're all trying to just find the solutions together. And just try to come to it with an open mind and try to debate a little bit more about what is good and bad about all these different things. So I like that kind of media. That's obviously what we're trying to do here, is spread that kind of debate mindset, to just come to the table with new ideas and debate
just
them.
to be specific, I think there's obviously no point in trying to persuade or reach people who have no interest in making world better or helping or saving anything. So like there's definitely going to be some like polarization in the sense of like some conflict, because like there has to be conflict. Like even if we're not polarizing, there's definitely conflict naturally with people whose interests and decisions, personal decisions, are just not aligned with the future being better. That's inevitable. It's just not trying to needlessly antagonize anybody, because the division is one of the strategies used by the people who want to just make stuff better for themselves and screw everyone else. Then dividing their potential opposition is strategy that they're using. So all of these sort of culture war based divisions or distinctions between people, I'm sort of very generally annoyed by, just on principle, because I understand it strategically what's happening. Like the people who are spreading it are often spreading it entirely cynically. It would be one thing if they just like legitimately believed that like as like a particular groups of people who shouldn't have the same rights as other groups of people, or are better or worse or whatever. It would be one thing if they honestly believed it, and some people probably do honestly believe such causes. But many of the like people with a lot of power, with a lot of money, who are stirring these kinds of things up, would be doing it as a strategy, cynically. So it's just important, I think, to keep it in mind. And I've heard some analyses recently, I forgot by who it was, like pointing to how a bad strategy to affect change, and I think it might have been actually, I think it was what the Monbiot was talking about. I think it was that the strategy that didn't work or doesn't work is to try to also somehow convince your dead set opponents. Like the strategy that I think the example he used that worked was of the gay marriage movement, who just incrementally got more and more and more people on their side. And so there I very much agree with him on strategically that what you need to do is be non-divisive and non-polarizing, of course, be inclusive of everyone who's undecided, normal person, generally probably wanting things to be better type person. So it's like all of those people, like as many allies you can get, like we talked last time in connection with Harry Potter and the trans movement. It's just, I think they were doing the exact opposite of this. They were alienating potential allies when they would do better to try to maximize the number of allies, because I think that Monbiot's analysis is fundamentally correct in that's how you win.
Yeah. If you teach the people that are far away from you, they just keep pushing further and further away. And I like, you just got to convince the people close to you first and expand that circle. So I really like the way he said that. And the other thing I thought was very interesting is that we kind of know where the tipping points are. And he was really interesting in saying that the tipping point of any social change is not 50%. It's about 25%. So if you can convince a quarter of any population that an idea is time, that it's time to kind of try this idea, then it's just inevitable. It will happen. That's and we're getting very close to that with this whole climate movement and the whole new way of doing things.
Yes, just as a political scientist, I think that's more true in political systems that are, well, democratic, obviously, but also that are proportional. Because in a proportional system, if you have 25% of people convinced, then you have a winning party, which means you have a prime minister, which means you can do a lot of stuff. If you definitely are supposed to have the government coalition, you shouldn't be in the opposition in that case. So that's true. I'm not sure how true that is 100% in countries like United States, for example, which have, instead of the English-speaking world, it's more common, where you have a more bipolar system where you have winner takes all. But even in that case, I guess having the 25% should still mean you have a good chance of winning, and even like consecutively. But it's not, I think, as guaranteed that it will have an impact on the outcome as in the proportional systems, which are more common in Europe. So maybe if he's from Europe, he was maybe talking more about specifically the European context more so. But of course, if you have a movement, even if it doesn't win elections, even if it doesn't have a winning party, if it's enough people, then there's a lot of pressure that those people can exert, or a lot of work or change that they can just do on their own, in spite even of regulation and sometimes or any kind of legislation.
Well, I really love the hope that it brings, and that's the final point that George made in his thing is the narrative is so important, to have kind of your key protagonist, which is all the people in the audience, anyone watching this video regularly, anyone that's part of our Saving the World Together movement or part of the RePlanet movement. They're all the heroes of their own story, and they all have that hope story that if you just kind of fight a little bit to convince one more person or push your agenda just a little bit further, then eventually you can topple over those evil empires or the evil powers that be that are trying to hold you back. And we have done it. We have solved so many problems in the past, the way we solved with the Montreal Protocol and fixing the ozone layer, and the fact that we got to the moon, and the fact that we've created the internet. So we've done amazing things in the past.
Or my personally favorite example, just look at dissolution of the Eastern Bloc or the Soviet Union, where you have countries like, particularly Czechoslovakia had the so-called Velvet Revolution, where I sort of keep getting back to it, but it's still fascinating to me, like especially after having political science education, that the people in the country could just say no, and the whole government and everything, like the military behind it, the police forces, just gave up, because how do you govern against 50% of the population? And that was one of the things, like the important moment was that it just united basically the whole pro-democratic part of the population, even though within the pro-democratic part of the population, you have all the divisions between like the social democrats or like the capitalists or like neocons or whatever. Like all of those people could agree, and also young and old, and also uneducated and educated, and like across these lines, also atheist and religious. Like they're like across all of the lines and distinctions and the divisions that like you strategically use to keep the population ineffective politically against you. Like once you become so bad, or the narrative becomes so powerful that it unites population across these lines, that everybody has a reason to oppose you, then even if the opposition, again, like in the Czechoslovakia, is completely peaceful, it's just people protesting peacefully in that, like saying like, no thanks, please stop. And then it just does. It's interesting to see in action that it just can happen.
Yeah, that's the hope. And that's the fact that we're just doing these little things. Once a week, Martin and I do this little podcast. It seems kind of small, and we still haven't obviously taken off yet. But if you're watching this, great, you're helping us get there. But just the little things can give us that feeling of gratification and hope. And I would highly recommend anybody out there to do something similar. Make your own podcast, or make your own articles, or just talk to friends. Every little thing you do to kind of make the world a little bit better and push that agenda just a little bit more mainstream.
just to explain mathematically how it works, it sort of doesn't matter if there's one channel who has like 1,000,000 followers that does this, or if there's like 500,000 channels of 2 people. The ultimate effect then is the same.
Yeah, exactly. Like even if Martin and I are able to convince our close friends or my children or our close family members from all these years of making videos, like that's a huge thing, and it can compound. If we just go from 2 to 4, my son mentioned this week he was interested in getting involved perhaps in a full-time way at some point. So we just keep on kind of doubling down, and just pushing a little harder to get these messages out to people, and just working with groups like RePlanet and all the other groups doing similar things. It synergizes, right? The synergizing of working together and exciting each other and just being happy about, getting up in the morning and saying, yeah, I'm going to look forward to a brighter future. We're going to make that future happen, one day at a time. So I liked it. It was a great week for me to just think about these things a little more focused, and I'm really looking forward to working more with RePlanet in the future. So I think that's mostly what we had today. Martin, did you have any final comments or anything you wanted to say about RePlanet specifically, or anything in general?
Yeah, well, I'm not still sure about the name of the marketing, the RePlanet. It sort of implies that we've already screwed over, ruined the planet. We can't specifically, to be clear, we can't specifically currently have another planet. So it really means fixing this one.
Yes, it's really just the play on words where we want to make a new plan for our planet and then kind of rewild our planet, refix our planet. But you're right, that's kind of interesting where I do kind of like the play on words. I like the double meaning.
So it's actually more about replanning.
Replanning, exactly. I think that's where if they actually had RePlanet with the I in it instead of the E, maybe it would have been more interesting. But perhaps.
That's great. I think that's cool. You should tell them.
Either way, it's cool. I do like the movement. It's a little similar to the Rethink X one we did a while ago. We had a article on Rethink X, which also talked about precision fermentation and just all these new technologies coming together. So very similar concept, whereas RePlanet's just doing more from the NGO perspective.
Just I had an idea, a funny idea. Let's hope that after we save the world, we don't have to resave it. I guess it doesn't have to be a movement that's like resaving.
Saving the world together again. Resave it. Yeah.
Part
but
two.
It's never finished though, right? It's the joys in the journey. It's never perfect. That's the idea of protopia. We're progressing constantly towards better. But you're right. Hopefully we don't fall back too far. It's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back sometimes. And we got to just go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. We're at least making progress. As long as we're not falling further back, then we're progressing each iteration. So, but it is fun. All right. Thanks so much, Martin, for your comments and feedback today. Thank you all for joining in with us today. Please like, subscribe, let us know what you want to hear. If there's a certain video you'd like us to make, we're always up for new ideas and new, if there's some organization that you know of that you'd like us to feature, we love just digging deep and trying to understand how we can work together to make the world a better place. And that's it for today. Let's keep on pushing forward and save the world together. Thanks, everybody.